Hello, and welcome back to this series, which essentially is like the second half of the series. Last week, I shared this four-parter all about what happened 10 years ago. And if you haven't watched that, the very brief overview is that 10 years ago, I completely changed the way that I lived and I worked. And I decided to go all in. This was just before I became pregnant with my son. So that was January 2015, but I made the move in November 2014. And my life and the way that it looked and the way that it felt and the way that it ran really shifted in all aspects. And 5 years ago, I had another chapter start. And maybe 6 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, but I wanted to give you kind of the next piece to the puzzle. Because when we are building things, I've always looked to people telling their stories. What happened? What did you do? What did you do at that point? Because the number of times I've been to see huge experts and they just kind of say these flippant things such as just build your network or just think positively or just think about what you want. It's really difficult to have something to action that you're kind of going to get to see results, because what I find sometimes is those experts are quite removed from their business now. They're not in the weeds. They're not doing the things because they are in a different position now. And I always want to show you the how, or at least sprinkle some ideas in there that you can play with, that you can experiment with and try on and see, would that work for me? Or sometimes I might, this is my dream. Hopefully I would say like one sentence and you go, oh, I hadn't thought of that. Okay, I'm going to give that a go. Or maybe that could work for me. I think sharing knowledge in this way is so key. So today I'm going to be talking about goal setting, strategy, dreaming big, and making a plan and making it happen. All the things I love to chat about. So 5 or 6 years ago, so this is sort of 2018, 2019, I had a 3-year-old, and around November 2018 was when I became pregnant with my daughter. But I didn't find out until the middle of December. And I had known for a while that we wanted to be lucky enough to have another baby. However, we were very much still in the absolutely exhausted, stretchy, oh my goodness, this all feels a lot stage. Even with our 3-year-old, we adored him and loved him and he was amazing. But as parents, as people, more should I say, we were shattered and we were really on this hamster wheel of trying to work the whole time, trying to piece all the pieces together. We were both freelance. Our son wasn't one of those babies who loved to sleep. He was awake a lot. He was very energetic. And yet I wanted to have another baby. And I was 36, almost 37. And I was really, I had a sense that it felt like the right time, even though, and you might see a theme with this, it might not have necessarily looked like the right time on paper. But it all worked out well in the end. My daughter arrived 9 months later and she's our girl. She was our baby that was coming through. So let me take you back to that time in terms of business. I was established. I was earning money. I had clients. Things were moving and shaking. But what I was noticing was maybe peers that I had trained with, people who had been in my sort of early circle, that's when people were really beginning to fly. And there was a lot of travel. This is all pre-COVID. A lot of travel, a lot of press, a lot of everything was kind of erupting. And I still, even at that stage, felt like I was not making do or just getting by. It was more than that. But I was in the middle of the class moment. Not particularly memorable. I was just kind of blending in and, doing my things. And you might argue that, well, you were being a mum as well and you were doing all of those sorts of things. So I was in the race and I was running it, but you wouldn't necessarily remember me. Or also, I didn't feel like I was running at my potential, my capacity. Again, that was a lot to do with parenthood. But I did have a niggle. I had a sense of it's time to move, it's time to do something different, it's time to get things in motion, because also, and this is a really key part, I had a bigger dream for my life, and I'm very realistic in that way. If I've got big dreams for life, I then need to work out how my business is going to support that, and what I need to do and get those things in place. Oh, also, and a thing I should also say is that I was working successfully as an actor and as a speaker and as a writer. So in terms of my portfolio career cooking, it was all doing all the right things. But I knew there was a next level and I was ready. And I have been in that stage so often in my life where I've had that sense that I'm peeking over and I can see what's in the next playground. And my curiosity is saying, go on, you want to get in there. And sometimes that leap is, it's quite the leap. So number one, what I did was I went back to dreaming. Now, this was not in a retreat in Bali, far from it. I had a very realistic and practical viewpoint on dreaming. And I think this is the piece that is often missing, is that when people talk about manifestation or goal setting or creating a vision board, it's very stylized. It's very curated. And I realized that at that time in my life, it wasn't necessarily the perfect time, or I was very much in the weeds. Like I was rushing home from work to then feed my son, to then I was on that kind of moment. And so I had to, in terms of dreaming, and this is the first takeaway, I had to acknowledge, firstly, there's not going to be a perfect time for this. And secondly, I decided to pick out the little windows of time I had. And so using my phone and utilizing the notes section, for example, I had a notebook by the side of my bed. I used to sometimes take pictures and then upload them into Canva and just like create a document, like just pull them across and be, it wouldn't look aesthetically pleasing. There wasn't a storyboard to it or anything, but it gave me that place to not only capture the things I wanted to capture, the thoughts, the feelings, the images, but it gave me somewhere to put them. So if I was looking to do some strategy, or if I was feeling a bit directionless that day, I always had somewhere to go. And I've always done that with content. I have a running list that I keep and I go back to it. So I'm never starting with a blank page going, nope, there's no ideas here. And, you could argue that means you're sort of always on, but I'd much rather be like that for me personally, being present in the world and capturing a few things and scribbling them down. So I kind of keep that engine running. Number two, I began to really forecast things and map things out in my head. And this is really difficult because, especially as I was thinking about having another baby and doing certain things in my business, often that can come down to nature or timing, or, there's a whole fertility situation that is unique to everybody. I also felt like, especially with acting, that there's always a bit of an unknown. You can do all the planning in the world, but if you're not flavor of the month, or if there's not films being made or whatever, you can't guarantee those things. You can ask the universe all you like, but unless there's a fit in that moment, it's out of your control, essentially. And so what I decided to do was to be in that open question thing of like, well, what would I do? I tried on all of these things. Well, what would happen? Or if I had another baby, how would that look maternity wise? Or when would this be a good time? Or what do we need to have in place? Or even logistically, like, where would we put the baby? Not like where would we put it and leave it, but like, how would we work out the bed situation? Because this is before we moved, and like, could we do this with childcare? What would this look like? What have we learned from last time? And I decided to really take all of those ideas out of my head in terms of planning and begin to journal on them. Or I would take my phone and just allow myself, like I was essentially being interviewed, and answer the question. And that was so useful because it almost felt like I was talking these things into existence. And sometimes as I was saying things, I'd be like, I don't know why I'm saying that, because actually that's not what I want. Oh, we could do this. And I was essentially giving myself the questions and the answers that I was looking for. Number 3, I really got great at systems. And I realized for that first 3 years of being a parent, because I was mainly the one at home, I was the one, project managing essentially. So maybe thinking about the food or buying the things, or I was in charge of the washing. And I really had to make space and decant my head if I was then going to go to work and going to go to the next level. So I think when you're in that space, sometimes it's easy to do things, or you don't need to build the systems because you're so in the system, you're just like doing it. And the more that, my mum helped out and my stepdad, and I just thought, oh my goodness, if I'm going to do this, I need to really take care of it. And so I've written 2 words here: capacity and contingency. So before, I'd kind of gone, well, I'll just, we're so local to loads of supermarkets and shops and things, like I'll just pick up some dinner on the way home. What do I fancy today? And then I started to build my capacity and my contingency of, actually, let me think about what we're going to have for the next 3 nights. So I had to build up that muscle and really stretch myself. And I know this is like really obvious, and some people might be like, what are you talking about? Of course, you're not just going to buy food from a supermarket for one thing, but I was just in that place. And you know what? I think when he didn't sleep, it was almost easier to just go, well, I'll just go to the shops for a walk, and maybe I was in that place. Number 4, I decided to play impossibility. I think when you're in that place where you're at a crossroads, when you're in that wobbly moment, it's really easy to get stuck and feel stale and feel like you don't know which way to turn. So I made sure that I surrounded myself with movement, with stories, with voices, with possibilities, people who had done it, people who had found a different way, somebody's perspective who I could borrow. Sometimes it was somebody's faith and somebody else's experience that I thought, well, I haven't actually got that data within myself, but actually what they're saying, well, if they can do it, maybe I can do it. And I think that is so important when you're in that wiggly wobbly stage of like knowing you want to go and do something. You have to create your environment that is in support of that vision. Number 5, I had to deal and seal some wounds. This, for me, has been a huge part of my motherhood journey, my parenting journey. I've realized that I've been carrying so many things over the years that I've not dealt with. And at times that has been difficult, parenting and being the parent that I want to be, and being the person, the adult that I want to be as well. And I made some really firm decisions. Now, of course, our bodies, our minds are very clever and they love to hold on to these things. But I had to give myself a pep talk at this time that if I wanted to go X, Y, and Z, these different directions, I had to say to myself, no, enough's enough. You need to deal and seal that wound. You need to stop that once and for all, or you need to really let yourself off the hook there, or you need to book a therapy session and really go into that deeply, and then park it, close it, and move on. And I had to become very deliberate in that because there was no space. And I think if you're, if you imagine a physical space of you trying to expand, but if you've got so much like weighing you down, you can't do it. You're not giving yourself any sort of wiggle room there. So that was incredibly powerful. And I think at any stage, if you're thinking about where to go next and dipping your toes into certain parts, you have to work on your mindset. And that is difficult and painful and challenging. And the mindset thing is not just like, oh, I'm going to say 3 positive affirmations and that's the mindset dealt with. You have to become acutely aware of what the heck is going on and what is still stuck and stale in your body, and come to the realization that it's just going to fester. And sometimes it has to come to the surface. And as I was doing my reflection of what's been happening this year, because I turned 30, no, I did not turn 34. I turned 43 at the weekend. I was saying to somebody the other day, it feels like 2 minutes since the numbers were the other way around. But no, I was born in 81, 43. I've come a long way this year, but it's been tough at times, incredibly so. So if you want to find out more, come over to my website. I am now a member of a members club in town. That's where I'm doing all of my one-on-one sessions. So if that's kind of piquing your interest and you think, yeah, actually it'd be great to work on my stuff, my strategy, where I'm going next, come on over and I can send you some details. We can set up a chat. Otherwise, see you tomorrow. We're chatting about money tomorrow and those elevations and what happened there. Lots of love. See you then. Bye.